word for word. Please repeat. Sa, he, Isha, this, Vitarhi, at the present. Adhyaste is ruling over. Asanam, the throne. Parthiva uchitam, just befitting a king. Pita Mahenam, by the grandfather. Upanyastam, being handled over. Ragya, by the king. Aranyam, forest. Vivikshatam, desiring. Aste, is there. Aduna, at present. Sa, that. Raja Rishi, the sage amongst the kings. Kaurava Indra, the chief amongst the Kuru kings. Shriya, glorious. Ulasan, spreading. Gaja Vaye, in Ashtinapur. Mahabhaga, the most fortunate. Chakravarti, the emperor. Brihat Shravaha, highly famous. Translation. The most fortunate emperor Maharaj Parikshit, who was entrusted with the kingdom of Hastinapur by Maharaj Yudhisthira when he desired to retire to the forest, is now ruling the world with great success due to his being glorified by the deeds of the kings of the Kuru dynasty. Please repeat. The most fortunate emperor, Maharaj Parikshit, who was entrusted with the kingdom of Hastinapur by Maharaj Yudhisthira when he desired to retire to the forest, is now ruling the world with great success due to his being glorified by the kings, by the deeds of the kings of the Kuru dynasty. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The prolonged sacrificial ceremonies undertaken by the sages of Naimisharanya were begun shortly after the demise of Maharaj Parikshit. The sacrifice was to continue for 1,000 years, and it is understood that in the beginning, some of the contemporaries of Baladev, the elder brother of Lord Krishna, also visited the sacrificial place. So here we're getting an indication of a time sequence here. When after Parikshit's rule, after he left this world, then that sacrifice began. And some of Baladev's relatives were there, his descendants. According to some authority, the present tense is also used to indicate the nearest margin of time from the past. In that sense, the present tense is applied to the reign of Maharaj Parikshit here. So in the translation is saying that Parikshit is now ruling the world with great success due to his being glorified by the deeds of the kings of the Kuru dynasty. So who is saying this? This is Sutta Goswami. And he's speaking to all the sages present there when Parikshit Maharaj is actually no longer alive. but he's saying that Parikshit is ruling. So we could, just like we say, well, Srila Prabhupada is still leading this movement. So in the same way, the rule of Parikshit is alive and well by his presence in his example. For a continuous fact, also, present tense can be used. The principles of Maharaj Parikshit can still be continued, and human society can still be improved if there is determination by the authorities. So we can still apply the present tense to Parikshit's rule if his practices are being applied today in this world. We can still purge out from the state all the activities of immorality introduced by the personality of Kali, if we are determined to take action like Maharaj Parikshit. He allotted some place for Kali, but in fact, Kali could not find such places in the world at all because Maharaj Parikshit was strictly vigilant to see that there were no places for gambling, drinking, prostitution, and animal slaughter. So these sinful activities mentioned here were not possible in the kingdom of Parikshit Maharaj because of his vigilance. He was just so much determination to see that these activities would not take place there, and he ruled by according to the scriptural guidance and the guidance of the Brahmanas. Modern administrators want to banish corruption from the state, but fools as they are, they do not know how to do it. They want to issue licenses for gambling houses, wine and other intoxicating drug houses, brothels, hotel prostitution, and cinema houses, and falsity in every dealing, even in their own, and they want at the same time to drive out corruption from the state. So here we have indication of how modern society, even though there may be a desire to be protected from these sinful activities, the determination is not very strong. So therefore, they create all these laws and bylaws, and it's all just diplomacy and offering different licenses. Exchanges take place between, there's a lot of favoritism and nepotism that takes place, and therefore the application of strong spiritual principles and guidance can't really take place because the foundation is not rooted in firm determination and guidance from the scriptures. So they want the kingdom of God without God consciousness. And that's the problem. The problem right there is it's wheeling and dealing with the Supreme. How can it be possible to adjust two contradictory matters? If we want to drive out corruption from the state, we must first of all organize society to accept the principles of religion, namely austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. And to make the condition favorable, we must close all places of gambling, drinking, prostitution, and falsity. These are some of the practical lessons from the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Srila Prabhupada is not mincing words. He's saying if we really want a solution, then therefore these principles must be adopted. curbing the principles of irreligion in order to make entrance for the principles of religion. So what is a key ingredient required for all of this? Of course, the chanting of the holy name is the great benediction offered for this age, because people cannot give up sinful inclinations without experiencing the higher taste. When Srila Prabhupada came to New York, he immediately introduced the chanting of the holy name, spoke about the philosophy of not being this body, and actually I don't think it was even until after the initiations that he mentioned it. I don't remember exactly, but the four regulative principles were mentioned later on. But still the determination to speak on such subject matters was always in the forefront of Srila Prabhupada's mind. And throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, there's mention of this. And here in this purport, he mentions how if the leaders in society today had such determination, if we are determined to take action like Parikshit Maharaj, then we can still purge out from the state all the activities of immorality. So this is a very fundamental point here, that in every action, Bhagavad Gita speaks of that behind every action, first of all, for every action there's 5 factors. There's the place, there's the endeavor, there's the person, the worker, the senses, and there's the supersoul. So ultimately, everything rests on the sanction of the Supreme Lord. But it's important to consider also these other factors. If we do any kind of action we perform, well, there's some knowledge, there's the object of knowledge, and then there's the knower. This is also mentioned a few verses later in the 18th chapter. And before performing some activity, there must be some impetus. If there's no impetus, of course there's always some impetus for whatever's there's always actions going on. So, and we can trace it back to some kind of impetus, even if it means being the laziest person on the planet. There's an impetus to be the laziest person on the planet. So there's perhaps a desire to be recognized as the laziest person on the planet. And but to understand how this whole psychological principle of action takes place, it's good, because then we can analyze and say, well, what are the motives for my actions? We can question our motives in this way. Behind every action there is thinking, there's feeling, and then there's willing. So before anything can take place, this process has to go on within the mind. And the mind is the center of all the senses. And Bhagavad Gita further elaborates on the different types of knowledge. The more knowledge we have of the situation, of the object of our work, and the more understanding we have of knowledge of ourselves, our relationship with the Supreme, then there is a better chance that our activities will be in line with the will of God, right? We can take reference from the scriptures, we take reference from association of devotees and the spiritual master. And the Bhagavad Gita explains that there's 3 types of knowledge, 3 types of actions, 3 types of workers, and if these fall into the categories of the 3 modes of nature. And there's three types of understanding, also under the modes, and there's 3 types of determination under these modes. And of course, for a devotee, we want to have this determination that is transcendental, an understanding that transcends these modes. But even if it's a question of developing the mode of goodness, this can be very helpful. We are encouraged to be acting, understanding what it is to be acting in the mode of goodness, and then offer the results of such work to the Supreme. There's a beautiful story just to illustrate how this process of impetus, determination, motivation, and then action takes place. There's a story of a young boy, actually. He was about 6 years old, and he was a newspaper boy in Chicago, in the South Side. It's a very rough area back in the day. And he was a little bit intimidated because on the street corners all around the area, there were other boys selling newspapers. And they were speaking very loudly, shouting out, hear all about it, hear all about it, here's the headlines for the day. And the boy felt intimidated because the kids would shake their fists at him because they didn't want the competition. So the young boy, he saw that there was this restaurant on the corner, and the restaurant was filled with people. And of course, that was also intimidating, but nevertheless, he decided to make a go of it. And he went inside the restaurant, and he managed to sell one of his papers at the first table. And then he went on to the second table, and he sold another paper. And the third table, another paper. And then by the time he got to the fourth table, well, the manager of the restaurant grabbed him and threw him outside. And but the boy was kind of inspired. He sold 3 papers, so he went back in. And of course, when the customers saw the young boy, they were kind of they were amused by his gumption. His determination. And so the fourth customer, fourth table, not only bought the paper, but gave him an extra dime for a tip. Oh, and the boy was so happy, And then the manager threw him outside again. And then the young boy was thinking, wow, I sold 4 papers. Not only that, I got a tip on the 4th paper. So he went back in. And then the manager was about to throw him out again, but the people said, just leave him alone. So the boy sold all his papers. And then the next day, he shows up again. Goes inside the restaurant. And the manager sees him. He says, oh, what do I do? So he left him alone. And eventually, actually, they became good friends later on. And he had no more trouble selling papers there. So this boy, later on in life, he actually became very successful. He had an insurance company or something. And he was reflecting on this little boy. That was him. He was thinking about, he was selling papers. Now, he had all these papers. He had to borrow some money to buy these papers. And if he knew he didn't sell these papers, they were of no use to him because he couldn't read. And secondly, he had paid money and he would be in debt. So there was a need. Now there was a need. The need became the impetus. And So he went about and sold the papers, and he also learned from the other boys. And also by going in and out and selling the papers, he got the know-how. So he got more knowledge. So the knowledge can also be knowledge will help us become more determined. The more we hear about spiritual subject matter, understanding the workings of material nature, understanding the dealings of the devotees with the Supreme Lord and their determination. So the more we hear of this knowledge, the more we can become inspired and also become more determined. And the third point that the man had learned was that the principle of acting, the activity of such knowledge. It's not enough to just have theory of spiritual matters, but we must put this into practice in our own lives. So these three components were actually the foundations for a lot of people's success in life. The inspiration, the know-how, and the practical application of this knowledge. We have so many examples. Just the other day we were hearing of Malati and her experiences in carrying gold, taking great risks. Imagine the risks. Having this gold strapped around your body and with a baby and no, not really much understanding of the environment that you're in and trying to get this gold to its destination. I was thinking the other day also Srila Prabhupada's determination, and when he was in Delhi and going out daily, trying to sell the Bhakti Godhead magazines, going to the printer, trying to raise a few pices and rupees to get the printing done, being attacked. He got attacked by a bull and got hit, injured by a bull, and still he continued on with his with his attempts. But to speak of all the other wonderful challenges that Srila Prabhupada confronted by coming to America, by trying to establish the three temples in India, the three major temples. So many challenges. Continuing with such great determination. Even the very fag end of his life. Still, even though the body could not really, he wasn't in a position, he was expressing to his disciples, no more management. Still, he was determined to keep preaching. And he was speaking, translating. To his very last day, translating Bhagavatam. And another component to this determination is faith. And again, Bhagavad Gita speaks of different types of faith. I'll read a little bit about them, the divisions of faith. So according to the modes of nature acquired by the embodied soul, one's faith can be of three kinds: in goodness, passion, or in ignorance. Now hear about this. O son of Bharat, according to one's existence, under the various modes of nature, one evolves a particular kind of faith. The living being is said to be of a particular faith according to the modes he has acquired. Men in the mode of goodness worship the demigods, those in the mode of passion worship the demons, those in the mode of ignorance worship ghosts and spirits. Those who undergo severe austerities and penances not recommended in the scriptures, performing them out of pride and egoism, who are impelled by lust and attachment, who are foolish and who torture the material elements of the body, as well as the super soul dwelling within, are to be known as demons. Even food each person prefers is of three different kinds according to the three modes of nature. The same is true of sacrifice, austerities, and charity. So these different components of our lives can be measured by how the modes, how we're being affected by the different modes. The type of foods we eat, the type of charity, austerities we perform, the type of worship. Our measure is, how will this be pleasing to Guru and Krishna? So faith in God. It boils down to having faith in the Supreme. There's also another beautiful story to illustrate one's faith and determination. There's a man named Masu Alami. He was from Palestine. And he was educated in Cambridge. Then he went back to live in Palestine. He became successful. But with all the political turmoil there, I'm not sure when this was taking place, but there was so much turmoil, he lost everything. He even lost his home. So he went into Jordan, into the Jordan Valley. On one side is the, well, there was Jericho. Actually, the area is Jericho. And there were mountains on both sides, and in the valley, it's just the arid desert, except for maybe a few small oases. It was just a complete desert. And he was determined that he would find water. And all the local Bedouins, the Bedouin sheik, the elders, they said, there's no water here. There used to be the Dead Sea. So there's just so much salt. And therefore this actually contributes to even more aridity. And even the government officials were saying, there's no water here. You won't be able to find water. The Jordan River ran not so far away, but to try to irrigate it would require so much financial work, and there was no money. So this man is simply determined to get water, and even the scientists from abroad were saying, no, you can't find water there. But he had been inspired because he had heard that in California, they were able to, and there's areas in California where it's desert, and they were able to get water. So he decided to start digging. Did he have machinery and everything? No machinery. He just started to digging with picks and shovel. He had some people who were living in a refugee camp were helping him, and everybody was laughing. And he dug, and he dug, and he dug, and he dug for like 6 months. And then finally, the sand became wet. And one of the Bedouins, elders, came over and says, you have found water? And he started to taste the water and put it on his face. He said, this is good water. And then he told Masu, he says, Masu, you have found water. Now you can die. This was like a tribute from an elder saying, you know, you have accomplished so much in this way. And then he went on to create like 15 wells, property of 2 miles wide and 3 miles long, and started to grow raised vegetables and fruits, citrus fruits, and so on. So this is just an example of how much can be done with determination. And again, going back, an impetus is very important for such determination to grow. And the Bhagavad Gita is one of the components of knowledge is the perception of the evils of birth, disease, old age, and death. Just like now we're getting a perception of the evils of disease. So this is becoming an impetus for people to make changes in their lives. You can see here in New Vrindavan, a lot of people are developing practices, developing gardens, and so this has become an impetus. So Many examples we can find in our scriptures also, of course, the story of Dhruva Maharaj, who was so determined. And if we apply such determination in trying to eradicate to purge the state from all activities of immorality. Of course, I know where I can start with my own challenges in that area. Purify oneself from beginning with applying the proper medicine to purify the false ego by chanting the holy names, purifying the mind and intellect by study of the scriptures, and hopefully by such process purify the activities of the senses. Then we can reintroduce this kingdom of Parikshit Maharaj. We can experience what it was like for him to be living during that time. So I'll stop here. Any comments or questions on this subject? Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Haribo.
Thank you. We're talking about the need and the impetus, and he gave the example of the newspaper boy.
Yeah.
And then we also have the story of this the crow who was trying to empty the ocean because the ocean has stolen the eggs, and he was trying to take the water out. And there also we saw there was a need because the eggs were being taken away, and then there was an impetus. Now, also the example of Srila Prabhupada distributing Back to Godhead magazines in Delhi, and there was also an impetus because his spiritual master asked him to do it, and it's an impetus. Now my question was that, okay, we all have this need, occasional needs which arises, and we deal with it with some kind of a, impetus. Like the government has announced a, what is that called? One check to stimulus check. Yeah, to all the, so there was a need, and then there was, a stimulus, or there's an impetus. But then how do we sustain, my question is, because we are talking about determination, and the slow progress from the need and then impetus, and finally it becomes a sustained determination. So, in our spiritual life also, we feel some kind of an impetus once a while, but then that doesn't translate into a long-standing determination to achieve, whether in terms of our improving our sadhana, or improving our service, or improving our relationship between devotees and all that. So my question is that how the need and impetus is, according to me, is an occasional, because there was circumstances which was, conducive to move ahead with, need and impetus. But when it comes to determination, it's a long-standing game.
Yeah.
So I just thought, maybe you can say a few things about that.
That's a great point, because we may be inspired, and then we lose that inspiration very quickly. It's part of conditioning. Actually, it reminds me of something I read driving on the road in Canada years ago. In front of the churches, they have these sayings on these banners. They change it every month or so on. So it said, "Aspire to inspire before you expire." So the aspiration to to inspire before we expire. But how do we maintain this level of enthusiasm and determination? And what's the impetus? So the key point here again is the impetus. How do I keep my determination from what's going to be the stimulus? The government could be offering stimulus checks, and then if we're not trained, or if we're not knowledgeable enough to know how to invest this stimulus so that I can grow and keep growing. There's a story like that in the Bible, where 3 people were given certain amounts of money, and then were asked later on what they did with it. And the one who had just put it away and saved it was better than the one who just spent it lavishly and foolishly. But the most intelligent one invested it, and it grew. How do we make it grow? Personally, I think, I'm sure there's many answers, and I would love to hear any other answers on this, but it's hearing from those who have more determination than we do. Hearing from the realized souls, hearing from advanced devotees. After all, Krishna said to Arjuna, I instructed this great science. The great kings became determined, inspired, but in due course of time, the succession was broken. That determination was lost. So Krishna comes again to reestablish this great science. So similarly, by surrounding ourselves with people who have more determination, that's one way of keeping this determination growing and growing. And I think another point also is, what do we do with our determination? If I've been given something of great value and I just keep it for myself. Srila Prabhupada spoke about this to Mother Jamuna one time, that I forget the exact commentary, but if we don't pass it on to others, we become envious. We just accept this determination, we accept this blessings and keep it for ourselves, then we actually lose it. We lose this determination. So to hear from others who are more determined, and to become determined as a result of that, and to share this determination with others.
To stay on that path of determination, or to sustain our determination, I think, as you said, the association of devotees, sadhu sangha, is important, and where you mentioned that how, being taking inspiration from those people who are always very, very determined to carry out the devotional service and the mission of the spiritual master. So if we are in touch and association with such people, then naturally the determination which we probably lacking get a get a boost by being association with those people. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hearing when we hear also of we have more information. I mean, inspiration and information can go hand in hand. determination comes from inspiration. But in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 18th chapter, in the verse where it speaks about knowledge, the object of knowledge, which is the work, and then the knower. So those three are the impetus to action. And so the more knowledge we have of something also can really help us in becoming inspired and determined. Because if we lack, for example, if I'm going into a place that I don't know anything about, if I go to another country and I have no knowledge of that other country, I'll be sitting on a plane and my determination and my assurance might be threatened. I may not feel so assured. I may be doubtful of what I'm getting into. But if I have some sense of what I'm to expect when I get off the plane, then I'll have, less reservation about going there, and I'll be more determined. So having knowledge. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Bhagavatam. Hare Krishna. We have one more verse for this chapter. Tomorrow's class, I believe, will be given by Her Grace Sukavaha Prabhu.